Shahrazad said, It has come to me, O auspicious king, that there was once a merchant of the merchants, master of many riches and of affairs of commerce in all lands. One day he mounted on horseback and left for certain places whither his business called him. As the heat became too vexing, he sat down under a tree and, putting his hand into his food bag, took from it a snack and also some dates. When he had finished eating the dates, he threw the stones to a distance, but suddenly an enormous Ifrit appeared who approached him, brandishing a sword and crying, "Rise up, that I might slay you as you have slain my child." On this the merchant asked, "How have I slain your child?" The other said, "When you threw the stones of the dates you had eaten, they struck my boy in the breast, and he died forthwith." Then said the merchant to the Ifrit, "Know, O great Ifrit, that I am a believer, and know not how to lie. Now I have many riches and children, and a wife. Also I have at my home deposits which have been trusted to me. Give me leave to go to my house, that I may render each his due, and, when I have done this, I will return to you. Indeed, indeed, you have my promise, and my oath that I will return to you forthwith. Then you shall do to me as you wish, and Allah is a witness of my words." So the genie had trust in the merchant, and let him depart. The merchant returned to his own land, rid himself of his obligations, rendered each his due, and lastly revealed to his wife and his children the fate that had overtaken him. So they all, relations, women and children, began to weep. Then the merchant made his will and rested with his folk until the year's end, after which, taking his winding sheet beneath his arm, he bade farewell to his nearest, to his neighbours, and to the folk of his house, and went forth, as it were, in spite of his nose. Then indeed was lamentation made, and grief cried over him. As for the merchant, he continued to journey until he came to the garden, where he was due on the first day of the new year. Now, while he sat down to weep over his fate, behold, a venerable Sheikh came towards him leading a gazelle by a chain. He saluted the merchant, wishing him a life of prosperity, and saying to him, "What is the reason of your staying alone upon this jinn-haunted spot?" Then the merchant told him of his adventure with the Ifrit, and the Sheikh, master of the gazelle, being greatly astonished, said, "By Allah, your faith, my brother, is indeed a rare faith, and your story is so prodigious that, were it only written with a needle on the inner corner of an eye, it would yet be a matter of reflection to the circumspect." Then he sat down by the merchant's side, saying, "I shall certainly stay here with you, my brother, until I have seen what happens between you and the Ifrit." So he stayed, conversing with the merchant, and beheld him swooning with fear and horror, a prey to deep sorrow and to stormy thoughts. Suddenly, as the master of the gazelle waited, there came a second sheikh, who advanced towards them leading 2 dogs of greyhound breed, which were both black. He came up to them, wishing them peace and asking the reason of their stay upon that jinn-haunted spot. So they told him the story from beginning to end, but hardly had he seated himself when a third sheikh came towards them, leading a bay-coloured she-mule, and he also wished them peace and asked them the reason of their stay. Again they told the story from beginning to end, but nothing is to be gained by repeating it in this place. In a little while a sand devil lifted, and a great wind blew heavily, coming towards the middle of the grassland. Then, the dust dispersing, the self-same genie appeared, a fine sharpened blade in his hand, and sparks of fire storming from his eyes. He came to them, and, seizing the merchant from among them, said, "Come, that I may kill you as you killed my child, who is the breath of my life and the fire of my heart." Then the merchant began to weep and lament, and the 3 sheikhs also set themselves most conspicuously to weep and groan and sob. But the first sheikh, master of the gazelle, at last plucked up his courage and kissed the hand of the genie, saying, "O genie, O chief among the kings of the jinn and their crown also, if I relate to you the tale of myself and this gazelle, and it is such that you marvel at it, O grant me in return mercy for 1/3 of the blood of this merchant." The genie answered, "Assuredly, O venerable sheikh, if you tell me the story, and I find it indeed extraordinary, I will grant you mercy for 1/3 of this blood." The first sheikh said, "O great Ifrit, know that this gazelle was my uncle's daughter and my own flesh and blood. I married her when she was quite young and lived with her for nearly 30 years, but Allah granted me no child by her. So I took a concubine who, by Allah's favour, gave me a man-child as beautiful as the rising moon, with fine eyes, meeting brows, and perfect limbs. When he had grown to be a boy of 15, I was obliged to journey to a far city on an important matter of business. You must know that my uncle's daughter, this gazelle, had been initiated since childhood into sorcery and the lore of enchantment. By the art of magic she changed my son into a calf, and the slave his mother into a cow, and put both of them under the care of our herd. A long time afterwards I came back from my journey and asked for my son and his mother. Then my wife said, "Your slave is dead, and your son has fled, I know not whither." For a year I remained broken by my heart's grief, with the tears ever in my eyes. Then, when the yearly feast of the day of sacrifice came round, I sent to bid my herd choose a well-fatted cow for me, and he brought me one, but she was my concubine, bewitched by this gazelle. Then I pulled up the sleeves and skirts of my garments, and, knife in hand, prepared to sacrifice the cow, but suddenly she began to moan and weep abundant tears. So I stopped and ordered the herd to sacrifice her. He did so, but when he had flayed her, we found neither fat nor flesh on her, but only skin and bone. Then I repented that I had sacrificed her, though my repentance was of no avail, and gave her to the herd, saying, "Bring me a well-fatted calf." So he brought me my son in the likeness of a calf. When the calf saw me, he broke the cord that held him, and running to me, rolled at my feet with groans and tears. Then I had pity on him, and said to the herd, "Bring me another cow, and let this be." At this point in her tale, Shahrazad saw the approach of the morning and discreetly fell silent. Then her sister Dunizade said, "Sister, your words are sweet and gentle and pleasant to the taste." And Shahrazad answered, "Indeed, they are nothing to that which I would tell both of you tomorrow night, if I were still alive, and the king thought good to spare me." On this the king said to himself, "By Allah, I will not kill her until I have heard the rest of her tale." Then the king and Shahrazad passed the rest of the night in each other's arms, till the king departed to sit in judgment. When he saw the vizier approach, carrying under his arm the winding sheet destined for his daughter Shahrazad, whom he believed already dead, the king said nothing to him, but continued to administer justice, raising some to office and debasing others, until the fall of day, so that the vizier was plunged into perplexity and the extreme of astonishment. When the diwan was over, King Shahryar returned to his palace.